I'm good. Yeah. So I guess it's been a year since my grandmother passed. I mean, I feel like when I talked to you last time, probably I was I was happy, but I wasn't like, I think I was going through the grief stage. And that's what I tell people. There's a stage where you're just grieving and it takes time. I don't, I tell people like, grief's not like you wake up and you're all better with it. Like you have to deal with it. I mean, there was weeks where I would just cry, but then I was like, well, she wouldn't want me to keep crying. So I got over it like with crying, but it took like at least I would say end of December, 6 months probably, because I do remember Christmas Eve was horrible. I think uh like just the whole day I just cried because I think when someone's so a part of like a holiday and they're not there anymore, it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And like, how am I supposed to act? And like, you just lose that. Okay, that family member's been part of that holiday for 30 something years. Oh, now she's gone. Okay, you have to create some new traditions, which is, it's hard. But I tell people if you can't get past the grief, then it's always good just to get into a grief group, which I did
I think
really
so as
early.
well, because what you go through is because you and I can go through a grieving period, and it takes me
Yeah,
6 months, it takes you 1 year, it takes you longer, it takes me longer.
yeah,
And there, because there isn't a time frame, I can't say, okay, Amanda, in about 6 to 9 months, you're going to be past this stage, and then you're going to be in acceptance, and then,
right.
yay, you're good to go,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I found out in the grief group. I was like, some of these people, and I understand because they had been married to their like spouses for like 30s, 40 years. They were all older, and and they were still going to the grief group, and this was like their second and third time. And so it might take people several times to go through like a grief group. I was part of a grief group. um, I knew my grandmother was going to pass and I saw it on my church's website and I signed up right away, and I only missed like the first week. So, and I did it for 13 weeks, and then they're like, well, do you want to do it again? And this was like this year in February. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like that was enough. 2 hours of Zoom every Thursday was enough for me. But I mean, like there was book and videos and stuff like that. But I mean, it's always good to hear what other people are going through because sometimes I think we feel like we're alone with the grief, we're alone with the health challenge, we're alone with whatever we're dealing with. So it's great to get like a community of people who are going through the same thing that you are.
Did you find it beneficial for you while you're going through that 13 weeks, or do you find that there's more benefits now that you've completed it and living your life?
Um, I think it was beneficial. Looking back now, I think it was very beneficial. I have an aunt, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't know how you were gonna be after," because she knew how my grandmother was and how important she was to me. So she's like, "Oh, I didn't know how you were gonna be, but you came out of it like so much stronger," and surprised her. And I mean, looking back now, I'm so glad that I did that because, like, I don't know if I would have be doing the things I'm doing now if I hadn't gone through that grief group. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do the grief group. I'm going to commit to doing it. And I committed to doing it. And sometimes you just have to commit to doing things in life that you don't really want to do, but you do it anyway. But now
Is
looking
there
back a year later, I could see how beneficial it was.
Do you think there's something that was like maybe holding you back? Because it sounds like, and I asked that question, Amanda, because it sounds like that maybe initially there was some hesitation in joining
Oh,
it.
I don't know if there was hesitation about joining it. I just didn't know what to expect. I think that was the big thing. I'm like, I've never gone through grief. I don't have anybody I've really lost. I had a grandpa who I lost when I was 16 from cancer. But I mean, that's been so long ago. And that wasn't like I saw that person like all the time. And then I lost another grandpa like 6, 7 years ago. So I mean, like, I hadn't had such a big loss, but I knew I needed help. And I think that's the big thing. I knew I was going to need help. And I was like, there was other family members who really struggled with losing my grandmother more than me. And they didn't do the grief groups. So that's why I think it's a big thing for people just to seek help, even if you're scared to do it.
I think it would help because if I put myself in that situation, um, there isn't anyone that I would turn to initially. Meaning that if my
Yeah.
grandmother would die today, I can't say, "Hey, Amanda, there's 5 people that I can go to." There's a number of people that I would tell eventually, right within the first couple of days, but there isn't anyone that I know that can go and say, "Hey, I need your shoulder right now because I just want to cry. I just want to lean on it." So the
Yeah.
grieving group is helpful because the way I imagine it, it's a space where no one's going to judge you. Everyone is there is experiencing something similar,
Right.
and there may be someone who's a little bit more experienced or a little bit more advanced when it comes to dealing with loss. Because, like you, I haven't had anyone that's close enough or important enough to me that has
Right.
passed. Like sometimes they'll tell you every time a family member dies, you should cry, but there's sometimes you have a family member that passes and you don't even know who the person is, so you don't
Yeah, that's
feel
how
that
it
kind of
is.
connection,
That's
right?
how it is though nowadays. Our family members are all over the across the US. Like we don't I mean like when I lost my grandfather like 7 years ago, I didn't end up going to his funeral. I wasn't close to him and like sometimes I think you're expected to do things that you're just expected to do them because they're a family member, but I mean like life is just it's just a lot. And I think the biggest thing was getting in that grief group because I remember the first thing I so they had two group leaders, but one of the things was, oh, like introduce yourself and then say like whatever you want to say. And I just started crying. And I was and I'm like, I wasn't embarrassed about it. I was like, and I said, "Oh, my grandmother passed last week or whatever." But all of these other people, they've had people who had passed like year a year or so ago, 2 years before. Like some of them were new, and then some of them like it was still taking them a couple years to get past it. So, I mean, it's okay. I mean, sometimes I think it's better to tell like strangers what you're going through than like people that are supposedly family,
I
which is
agree. It's like,
horrible to say.
yeah, it's like telling I think something similar, and this is not to minimize death, but something similar would
Yeah,
be your success. Like if you were to tell a stranger, there's
yeah,
sometimes a stranger would be more happy, they'd jump for joy. Where you tell your friend or a family member, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool, right? It's kind of this nonchalant. It's not
yeah. Like
important to them, right?
that's how I feel about my life right now. Like I have a friend, and I tell him stuff like because I have my podcast, and I tell him stuff, and he has his own podcast, so he gets excited for me, which is great. But like if I told a family member, they just don't get it.
Yeah, it's you realize I categorize people that we keep in our inner circle in 3 categories. There's the friend there's the person that's going to support you. Anytime you tell
Right.
them an idea, tell them a plan, they're happy for you. There's
Yeah.
the one that's the only time you hear from them is, okay, what party is it on Friday? Are we partying Saturday? There's that friend. And
Right.
then there's a friend that you don't necessarily speak to every day or every week, but you know in your heart, anytime something major comes up, you can call that person and say, hey, so and so, I need you right now. And they're there for you.
Yeah. I feel like we all need those people in our life because our family's not going to give it to us. I
So
mean,
what have you done? So in 2021 and 2022, what have you been up to outside of your parents and things like that? I know last time we spoke and you mentioned now you have your own podcast, but how is life for Amanda going, and how are you handling everything now? Now that you're re-energized and it looks like it's a new you.
I'm this is crazy. Actually, I'm super excited. So, but it's been quite I feel like it's been quite a year, like honestly. Um I think the biggest thing is one of the biggest things was I moved to Austin, Texas. And so I've been here for it'll be 8 weeks. So I mean, I tell people that was a change from, but I was from living in northern Arizona, but I mean, like, that was a big change. And I tell people, like, I didn't know anyone and I didn't have family or friends here, but like, I feel like I told a family member this, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. I feel like I'm just super happy. And I think it was just because I was in like a toxic environment early this year. And I had family members, and now I don't have those family members in my life. Like, I don't have to deal with it, like, and worry about it because I'm the type who's very, like, if someone feels bad or somebody's sick or something, then put on that, I put that on my shoulders and stuff. So, I mean, I tell people life, you could change your life, just you have to make the choice. It's not an easy thing to do.
Was the move a way of you finding like a therapeutic way to rediscover yourself? Because you mentioned that you're not in a
Yeah,
toxic nature environment, sorry, and then you mentioned family members, and I point that out because that's an interesting connection. How we're just talking about
right?
the passing of your grandmother and some of the things that you're experiencing with your family. Now that you moved, and one of the first things you mentioned is that you're out of that toxic environment. Was
Right.
it family that was kind of keeping you in a situation that you wanted to get out and ultimately you needed to get up
Yeah.
and move to be
Yeah.
free from it?
Yeah, my grandmother's passing was hard on everybody and all of that and stuff. And some people were still depressed about it. And I was at that point where I just wanted to be happy and I didn't want to worry about like drama. I'm not into drama. And I was just at that point where I wanted some independence from staying being away from family members and stuff. So I was like I had this idea like late last year. I was like I just have this feeling I'm going to be moving. And I didn't know where. And so that really was the start of it. Like I don't know if people believe in God or anything, but that's what I believe. And so I just had this feeling I was going to move and I just didn't know when. But now looking back, I could see like the pieces coming together. And I think it was June where I was like, okay, it's now time. And then I really just sort of was like, okay, I'm going to look up the best places in the US to live. And that's how I decided.
I went through something similar in my 20s where
Yeah.
um 10 years ago, for those who want to age me. So um, I
Well, I'm
remember
31, almost 32. So,
there you go. So we're about the same age. So I remember I wanted to move, but
right.
I felt like it was calling me to move, right? And when
Yeah,
I
that's
did
how I
it,
felt.
absolutely. When I did it, I was like, I need to go somewhere where I haven't been before. So I was still within, well, we have something called like the GTA where it's like boroughs together. So it's like a city, but it's
Yeah.
all connected.
Yeah.
So I found a place similar to you. I searched, I was like, okay, I haven't been here before. I haven't visited. I don't think none of my friends live in this area. I was like, I want to live here. And for the first, let's say, 6 months, I didn't know anyone. I would come home, it would be
That's
peace
how
and quiet. I
I know
loved it.
that's how I'm feeling right now. I mean, like I'm like sometimes I'm like, oh, I do want to talk to a little more people, but I'm like, I love the quiet. Like I don't have to like everybody. All my family members are like, why are you moving to Austin, Texas? And they were all like worried about me. My aunt's like, oh, Amanda's gonna be fine. Why is everyone worrying about her? But like I've grown my confidence so high. Like I'm not worried about things. And I think, and I'm not that shy person that I was like 10 years ago or even a year ago or 2 years ago. And I think that's the thing is our family still thinks of us like as someone like 2 years ago or in our early 20s or like my dad was like calling me and stuff and I'm like all of a sudden you care like why are you calling me like it was sort of weird um but I mean like you can't really take offense to anything people do but you just sort of are like okay that's their personality that's just what they're gonna do but the people who really get you are like those friends.
I think they still look at you as maybe the little girl. And they're
Yeah,
like,
the little
oh,
girl.
yeah.
I think that's it. And I haven't and my dad's not been in the picture like we moved out of Arizona when I was 14 years old. And well, the next time I saw him was like in like high school like cuz we went back east or something for my grandparents like some anniversary or something. And so but I mean like he hasn't seen me that much in my 20s. Like high school graduation, my sister's graduation, and my sister's college graduation, and then last time I seen saw my dad was like 6 years ago, and that was at my sister's wedding. So I mean, like you can't they those people can't take anything any of their advice to heart what they say. I feel like that's the thing. It's sort of like okay,
Yeah, you take it with a grain of salt because you, and to be fair, and for everyone listening, you don't know each other like that, where it's definitely not on the same level as you and your grandmother, right? So there's a
no.
different level of it. So when this person's coming around and they're, as you mentioned, they're showing this concern, it kind of catches you off guard because you're
Yeah,
thinking,
I was
what's going
like
on?
I was like, what's going on? Like you have like he's like, oh, I saw something that you posted. You had some news or something, and then he's called a couple of times and stuff. But I'm like, you haven't even been calling like the past couple years, so now you're calling? Like I didn't understand it. And I mean, I tell people you don't always have to have a relationship with every single family member. If they're if they haven't I feel like the biggest thing I've learned with all my health issues and stuff that I had to deal with is that I know who is the more important people in my life. So they get a priority. And the people who weren't there for me, they're on the bottom of the list. Or the people who are now coming into my life, because I had so many amazing people come into my life this year, um, they're at the top too because maybe they just make me feel good or they're supportive or like it's a two-way street. And sometimes I think your family's just not going to get it, especially if they don't get people being in like doing podcasts or on being like entrepreneurs or they think you need a 9 to 5 job. They're just not going to get it.
And on that note, how is that going for you now with the people that you're meeting with your podcast, the journey of your podcast? How is that going for you now, Amanda?
Yeah, it's been great. So it's been a year since I've been doing it weekly, but is I actually started it back in May of 20 or no 19. It's been 2 years. It's over 2 years. It'll be 2.5 by the end of the year. Um, yeah, so that's great. It's so funny. With the podcast, I wasn't taking guests when we last talked. And so I realized I was like, oh, I'm going to do one guest per month. That was my original thought, which got thrown out of the window. But I mean, like, I did it in November, December, January, February. And then at the end of February, like, all of a sudden, I was like, I'm like, oh, I should just do this weekly, have guests, and then do one solo episode. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And it sort of snowballed. In May, I celebrated 2 years. So I did like several special episodes with that for like a little over a week. But I've been having amazing guests. I've had, let's see, I counted it up and I've recorded 38 interviews this year. And
Congratulations. That's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot. And I was the one month, and I think it was April, I was like, and I did 17, and I'm like, okay, I'm never doing that again. But like, I was like, but I'm already into like, it's amazing because I'm already into like April with like guests and stuff. So I'm really I'm like, I could take a few months off. I do have my 100 episode, which will be January 2nd of next year. So, I mean, that's great. I have a friend interviewing me for that. But one of the things was, I was like, I want people, like, I have all my guests, either they educate people, which great topics like trauma, mindset, all of that, or I want people to inspire. So I have some, I haven't done as many, but I've done like 3, 4, 5. I have a couple coming out in the next couple months, but like they're just stories that inspire you. Like you look at their story and you're like, how did they get through that? And I think that's a big thing right now. It's like we have stories that like need to be told, like I tell people.
I agree. I feel the same way. I think our job as people who have podcasts, who have online shows, whatever name you want to give it, I think our job, our primary job, in my opinion, is that we're giving a voice to people that maybe feel that they don't have a voice or who don't have the courage to speak up. And when you initially shared your story about what you went through, and now you're here back for part two and hopefully part three, you know,
Yeah.
you're share there you go, you're sharing your story. There's someone out there that is going through something very similar to you and they don't have the courage or they don't have the voice to say it. And they're going to look at this and they're going to say, that young lady, Amanda, was going through something that I went through. I dealt with a parent or a family member that passed. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt lost. I was dealing with toxic family members. I was dealing with toxic friends. I felt also that I had to move, but I didn't have the courage or maybe the resources to move. And they're going to listen to you and see that you did all of this and then some, right? How does that feel for you that you can be the light for someone? You can be the voice. You can be the courage for someone out there.
It's incredible, honestly. Like people tell me like I'm incredible and and I'm just like, and I have to think, I'm like, sometimes you're so close to your story that you have to really think about it and you're like, oh yeah, I've gone through a lot of crap in my life, but I've come out the other side. And I think that's the big thing, is that I've come out the other side. And you have to accept the compliments, because I think I remember us talking about this. You have to accept the compliments, because you and I both said, I think that it was hard for us to get to that point. But I mean, you have to realize even one little part of your story could help someone else out. And that's why I do podcast interviews, is because I want people to be inspired and know that your story is never, it might have been the horrible story, but you can get through it and go the other side. And tell your story to other people. And that's the big thing, right? It's not about us in this world, it's about other people. I tell people.
I think so as well. And to do this job and to do it consistently, day in, day out, week after week, you have to love it and you have to be so selfish because you're doing everything, right? You're doing the interview, you're asking the questions, you're doing the editing, doing uploading, you're doing everything. Once a guest appears on the show and they leave, that's it. Until you let them know, hey, your episode is up. Here's the link. Here's maybe a picture.
Yeah,
Here's
right.
this. Here's that.
And then sometimes you're like, you don't even hear from that guest. Sometimes I'm like, okay, did you even get the email? So I'm like, okay. But some guests are great. They're good about sharing it. So it just depends on the guest.
I agree. I agree. And I just love so much hearing the positive feedback from some people. And I've asked myself this question, and I'll ask you it. Um, if we weren't going through everything that we're going through in the world today with the pandemic and all this stuff, if I could, I would love to have been able to meet every single person whose life have impacted in regards to doing this. Is that something that you would like to experience as well?
Yeah, I would love to meet like every single person that's like listened to my podcast. I've I'm hit 40,000 today downloads. And but I mean like I have like 100 countries where they're listening and I am like I've never been to any of these countries, but that's amazing. Like that's amazing. Like and I and a lot of my podcast guests, like I would love to meet them too because they are incredible people. Somehow you attract incredible people to your podcast by like everybody being by you being incredible. I think that's what it comes down to.